Doesn't matter. These are some of the right things. I've done a lot of things in my past. Hello, everybody, and thanks for coming to this panel. I'm going to talk primarily about the venture capital perspective to investing, which is not typically impact investing, actually, and then how sort of the lessons learned from that when it comes to energy investing and some of the transitions I've made in my own career. I started to get involved in investing as a venture capitalist in a very interesting way, where we were working with very early stage technologies, actually out of the Department of Energy and out of the Department of Energy laboratories. And actually, I'll start out with a shout out to science, since there's the March for Science today. I had the privilege of actually working with many really brilliant, motivated scientists who really were trying to move the needle on renewable energy. The problem is they were doing this in labs. They were not themselves the entrepreneurs typically. They didn't really know how to get their technologies out to market, and that's where we came in. And we invested, but we also really worked very closely with them to start companies. But this was very high risk. And I don't know how many of you were in the plenary session when you saw the chart that Marilyn showed of the up and down in clean tech investing. I lived through that, both the up and the down. I looked at solar, biofuels, batteries, energy efficiency technologies, kind of the whole gamut, really with the hope of making money at doing that, but also with moving the needle towards renewable energy and trying to approach solutions to climate change through that endeavor. And if you did see Marilyn's chart, you know that most of those kinds of ventures failed. I would say more than 90% of mine did. But I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from that. That doesn't sound optimistic, but I will sort of transition to so what did I learn from that experience that might help color how we go about investing to really make a difference for climate, for the environment. Fundamentally, I just don't think venture capital is the right vehicle to do that, and I think that's part of the story. It's a very imperfect tool because most venture capitalists are looking for financial returns, and when you start early in breakthrough technologies, it's really hard to get there. VCs have other options of where to put their money, and typically those might look like better options. They're sort of lower hanging fruit. And energy in particular has some interesting challenges because it's a huge scale. The energy infrastructure is very big scale, and VCs needed to see you prove it at scale. That's sort of a conundrum. You can't prove new energy at scale unless you have a lot of money. But when they said, well, we'll give you the money only once you've proven it, that became something that you just couldn't bridge that gap. I think I do fundamentally still believe that there is potential in our scientific community in this country and the world to continue to make impact in innovations for energy technologies. I think the seeds of a lot of great ideas are still out there. The trick is how do we get those ideas to market in a way that can allow us to achieve some successes. And it was really in my own mind when I was looking at that I was thinking, well, okay, I don't think venture capital is the way to do it. Maybe philanthropy is. And that was really part of how I found Rachel's Network, of which I am now board chair. I will say that one of the things that's exciting to me is a recent announcement about a fund that Bill Gates has started called Breakthrough Energy, which is really, it's $1 billion. And I'm kind of hoping, since he's a philanthropist, but also a technologist, that he'll be able to figure out how to bridge that gap. So I don't know, I think that none of us really know a lot about it. It's relatively new. But certainly when I saw that announcement, I thought, wow, maybe that's something that can really start to make the difference. But I would say in the meantime, what I've noticed that's also a story of hope for me is, okay, maybe it's not the breakthrough technologies. Maybe there's some stuff we can do with the technologies that are already out there. And it's really been about sort of investing in business model change. And again, if you were in the plenary session, you would have heard Jigger talk about some things that have been done to really sort of make solar more accessible through SunEdison, for example. And the great news about that, even though financially, some of those things didn't quite really get the returns for VCs that they wanted. It has created a much broader adoption of renewable energy technologies, and through that has actually sort of driven down the cost of wind and of solar, so that we don't necessarily need those breakthrough technologies, even though there are some scientists still working on those. I have one example of a company I've come to know of through one of the other hats I wear, which is I teach a course at Princeton University about entrepreneurship. This is a group that graduated a few years ago now, and they've started an organization called Solstice. It's based up in the Boston area. And what they're trying to do is increase adoption of solar for the bottom of the pyramid, so that actually 80% of people in the US who don't have a roof because they don't own their own home, and who can't afford the upfront capital investment, even if they do have their own roof, to actually invest in solar. And the idea is to use community solar, which is not a new concept, but it's really sort of a co-op model, if you will. You own a piece of a solar farm as opposed to having to put solar on your roof. But their idea is really about customer acquisition, using community organizing tools. They were actually people who were in the first Obama campaign and then worked in the White House, but to use community organizing tools to bring people into community solar and have them be able to buy a little bit of it. Their challenge right now is that even if you're not having to put solar on your roof, you still need to be evaluated for your financial feasibility as if you were taking out a mortgage on your house. And what they're trying to do is now show that there could be tools to evaluate those purchasers in a way that just says, hey, can you pay your electricity bill? If you can pay your electricity bill, then you can become part of community solar. You don't have to have a credit rating as if you were buying a house. And they have actually received some Department of Energy funding to investigate those kinds of models. So again, business model changes that can really potentially make the difference. And I'll close just to get back to Rachel's Network. Some of what we're trying to do at Rachel's Network is really look at market mechanisms for moving the needle. I don't know that I'll have time to go through some examples, but really sort of collective philanthropy. So each of our members does her own philanthropic work, but we're trying to sort of bring people together to collectively fund solutions and opportunities. And actually, as a good segue to that, and to the next speaker, I'll mention one of our initiatives is actually a partnership with Ashoka, where Ashoka was looking for more women, environmental social entrepreneurs into their network. We used our network to supply that pipeline, and then we fund the fellow on the other end. We're now working with our second fellow, and it's been a tremendous partnership. So I'll just leave you with some of those thoughts about the transition from maybe a model that doesn't quite work for impact investing to some new opportunities using philanthropy to try to move the needle. Thank you.